My name is Emily Carter, I'm 34 years old, and if you asked anyone in my neighborhood, they'd probably tell you I had the kind of life other women envied. I live in a quiet suburb just outside of Austin, Texas, in a 2-story brick house with white shutters and a wraparound porch that always smelled faintly of roses in the spring. I worked as a pediatric nurse, and my job, though exhausting, gave me a sense of purpose every single day. Children trusted me. Parents leaned on me. And I felt I was doing something that mattered. And at home, I had Daniel, my husband of 8 years. Daniel was 37, a successful lawyer, at a well-known firm downtown, tall and charming with a quick smile that could win over any jury. When people saw us together, they often said we looked like the picture-perfect couple, the nurse and the lawyer, stable careers, a comfortable house, a marriage that seemed steady and loving. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. But my life wasn't just about Daniel and me. There was also Sophie, my younger sister. Sophie was 29, a whirlwind of energy and spontaneity, the opposite of my measured and orderly personality. She was an influencer, the kind of person who could make a living posting pictures of her life online. To me, her world always seemed shallow hashtags, product sponsorships, perfectly posed photos in glamorous outfits. But I never judged her out loud. She was my sister, and no matter how different we were, we had always been close. Sunday brunches with our parents, spontaneous shopping trips where she pushed me to buy clothes that were a little less boring nurse, and countless late-night phone calls where she shared her dreams and I gave her advice. She always joked that I got the brains and she got the beauty, though I knew she was smarter than she gave herself credit for. When Sophie introduced us to Michael Reed, I was relieved. Michael was 35, a tech entrepreneur with a calm, steady demeanor that balanced Sophie's impulsiveness. He adored her, and it showed. He was the kind of man who grounded her without dimming her shine, someone who seemed solid and trustworthy. I remember the day Sophie announced their engagement. She bounced on my couch like an excited child and asked me to be her maid of honor. She wanted Daniel to be a groomsman too, she said, because it would be perfect. That word perfect kept echoing in my life, like everyone believed we were all characters in some flawless family portrait. So at that time, I truly believed my life was whole. I had a husband who still kissed my forehead every morning before work, a career I was proud of, a home that felt safe, and a sister stepping into her own happiness. I had no reason to question anything, no reason to imagine that underneath the polished surface, cracks were already forming. I thought the story of my life was one of stability and love. I didn't know yet that all of it was about to collapse, and that I would be the one forced to expose the truth. At first, it was nothing more than a shift in rhythm, the kind of change every marriage goes through when life gets busy. Daniel had always worked long hours at the firm, but now his late nights at the office were becoming more frequent. At first, it was once or twice a week, then 3, then 4. Some nights, I'd be sitting at the kitchen table with dinner growing cold while he texted that he wouldn't be home until after 10. He always had a reason: some high-profile client who needed urgent documents reviewed, or an emergency court filing. He reassured me that this was all part of the grind, the sacrifice that would lead to him making partner one day. I wanted to believe him. After all, I'd built my entire marriage on trusting this man. But slowly, the little things began to eat away at me. Daniel used to be the type who'd leave his phone on the kitchen counter without a second thought. He never cared if I picked it up to check the time or Google a recipe. But suddenly, his phone wasn't just locked, it had a new passcode I didn't know. When I asked about it, he gave me a quick smile and waved it off. Firm policy. Confidential client stuff. Nothing personal. His answer was too easy, too rehearsed, but I nodded anyway, because doubting him felt like betraying myself. And then there was Sophie. My little sister had always been vibrant, dramatic, sometimes careless, but lately, she had developed a strange new habit. Every time we were together, she found a way to bring Daniel into the conversation. "Your husband is so charming," she'd say with a grin, or, "I bet Daniel's clients love him, he just has that kind of presence." At first, I thought it was harmless, just Sophie being Sophie, always impressed by charisma. But sometimes, when she said his name, there was a flicker in her eyes, quick as a shadow across the sun. A kind of spark I didn't know how to name. I brushed it off. That's what I did best. Brushing things off, telling myself I was imagining shadows in a well-lit room. but my subconscious collected evidence even when I refused to acknowledge it. Like the night Sophie showed up for brunch at our parents' house wearing a perfume that made my stomach twist. It was familiar, though I couldn't place it right away. Then, hours later, when Daniel came home from one of his late nights, I leaned in to kiss him and smelled the same notes clinging faintly to his shirt collar. A floral scent, not mine, not his, but hers. Still, I swallowed the rising nausea and told myself I was paranoid. It's funny how denial works. It doesn't silence the alarms going off in your head, it just muffles them, like throwing a blanket over a fire alarm while the smoke keeps thickening. I told myself that all marriages went through phases, that Daniel was simply under pressure, that Sophie was just admiring him the way a younger sister might admire an older brother-in-law. I told myself stories, because the alternative, the truth that dared to whisper at the edges, was too painful to face. But small cracks in a facade have a way of widening when you look too closely. I noticed Daniel's gym routine shifting. He'd always been a morning runner, the type to lace up his sneakers before sunrise, but now he was disappearing in the evenings. Less crowded at night. He explained when I asked. I can focus better. I accepted it at face value, but unease simmered underneath. It didn't help that Sophie suddenly became interested in legal dramas on television, claiming she wanted to understand what Michael deals with at work. Except Michael didn't practice law, Daniel did. It was one of those comments that snagged in my mind like a thorn I couldn't quite pull out. The unease grew sharper at family dinners. I would catch myself watching the two of them across the table. Their body language was too careful, their smiles too controlled, like actors in a play who had rehearsed their roles just enough to seem natural, at least to everyone except the one who knew them too well. My mother noticed me staring once. "You're being weird, Emily," she said gently, squeezing my hand. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I replied, hating how easily the lie slipped from my lips. I had begun to despise that word. Perfect. It felt like a blade wrapped in silk, cutting me every time I heard it. But if denial dulled the alarms, suspicion gave me new ears to hear them. I started to see things I had ignored before. The way Daniel would tilt his phone away when a text came in, the half-smile he gave to messages he never shared. The way Sophie sometimes excused herself during family events to take a call and returned flushed and distracted. These weren't smoking guns. Not yet. They were breadcrumbs scattered across my life, daring me to follow them. And still, I tried to smother the doubt. I wanted so badly to believe my marriage was intact, that my sister was incapable of betrayal, that the life I had built wasn't just a fragile set piece waiting to topple. "You're tired," I told myself. "You're overthinking. Nurses see worst-case scenarios every day. It's bleeding into your personal life. Let it go." So I did. I let it go, again and again. Each time shoving the unease further down like clothes stuffed into an overflowing drawer. But the drawer was getting full. The cracks were spreading. And somewhere deep down, I think I already knew, you can't cover something forever. The truth finds its way through, whether you're ready to face it or not. Looking back, I realized those months were the quiet unraveling before the storm. The signs were everywhere: his passcode, her perfume, their glances, my gnawing doubt, but I clung to the illusion of normalcy. Because admitting the truth then would have meant destroying everything I thought I knew about love, family, and loyalty. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. The night of Sophie's engagement party was supposed to be joyous, the kind of milestone our parents had dreamed of for years. They transformed their backyard into a glowing wonderland, fairy lights strung between oak trees, tables draped in ivory cloths, champagne flutes waiting on silver trays. A soft Texas breeze carried the scent of roses from my mother's garden, and the air buzzed with the laughter of family and friends. It should have been a perfect evening. I arrived early to help my mom set up the food platters, arranging cheeses and crackers while Sophie flitted around like a hummingbird, too giddy to sit still. Michael stood by her side, looking smitten in his navy blazer, his hand resting protectively on her back whenever she leaned too far into a guest's hug. Watching them together, I felt nothing but pride for my sister. She'd found someone good, someone who seemed solid, and I was happy for her. Truly. Daniel arrived later, straight from the office, his tie loosened, his hair slightly mussed like he'd run his hands through it on the drive. He kissed me quickly on the cheek, murmured something about a long day, and slipped into the crowd with that easy charisma that made people gravitate toward him. Everyone loved Daniel. He was charming without effort, the kind of man who could win over a room without even trying. I'd always been proud of that until that night. The first half of the party was uneventful. I refilled drinks, laughed at old family stories, and gave Sophie a hug when she showed off her sparkling engagement ring for the 10th time that evening. My father made a toast about love and legacy, and guests clinked glasses, cheering. Everything seemed normal. It was only later, after I ducked inside to grab more cheese from the fridge, that the moment happened. Balancing the platter in my hands, I stepped back out onto the porch and froze. Daniel's laugh drifted through the night air, low and intimate, followed by Sophie's unmistakable giggle. It wasn't the kind of laugh she used with family. It was lighter, breathier, tinged with something flirtatious. My body went cold, even as the warm night wrapped around me. I crept closer, careful not to make a sound, my eyes adjusting to the shadows at the far end of the porch. There they were, my husband and my sister, standing just a little too close. The kind of closeness that hummed with an unspoken charge. Sophie's face tilted up toward Daniel, her blonde hair catching the glow of the fairy lights. His hand wasn't on her, not exactly, but it hovered near enough to feel like it might as well have been. And his smile, that secretive, knowing smile, was the one I hadn't seen in months. The one that used to be mine. "You can't say things like that," Sophie whispered, her voice breathless, playful. "Why not?" Daniel replied, his tone low, teasing. "It's true." The cheese platter in my hands suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. My heart slammed against my ribs, loud enough I was certain they could hear it. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to step back, to retreat before I learned something I could never unknow. But my feet carried me forward anyway, my voice bright and falsely casual. "There you are," I said, forcing cheer into my words as I stepped into view. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers caught sneaking out after curfew. Sophie's cheeks flushed a shade too pink, and Daniel's smile faltered before settling back into its usual confident mask. "People are looking for the bride-to-be," I added, holding the cheese platter like a shield. Sophie tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes flicking everywhere but mine. "We were just getting some air. Daniel was telling me about that case he won last week," she added quickly, her tone airy but brittle. "The Brett case?" I asked, my eyes narrowing slightly. "I thought that was confidential." Daniel's grin didn't waver. "Just the boring parts," he said smoothly. "Nothing classified." The words felt rehearsed, as if he'd already anticipated my question. He stepped forward, brushing past me back into the party, Sophie trailing behind him with her champagne glass. And just like that, I was left alone on the porch, holding cheese and drowning in the sound of my own pulse. For a long moment, I stayed frozen there, staring at the twinkling lights overhead. My chest felt tight, like the air itself was pressing down on me. Was I overreacting? Was I twisting innocent behavior into something sordid? They hadn't touched. They hadn't kissed. It could have been nothing. But the way they jumped apart, the guilty pink in Sophie's cheeks, the defensive ease in Daniel's reply, none of it felt like nothing. It felt like something. Something dangerous. I walked back into the house and set the cheese platter down on the counter, but the food might as well have been invisible. All I could see was the space between Daniel and Sophie, charged and electric, burned into my memory. For the rest of the evening, I became hyper-aware. I watched them from across the room, noting every glance, every shift in posture. Sophie laughed a little too hard at one of Daniel's jokes. He lingered a little too long when handing her a glass of champagne. Small things, insignificant on their own, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. My mother pulled me aside at one point, concern in her eyes. "You look pale, Emily. Everything all right?" "Just tired." I lied, forcing a smile. "It's been a long week." She nodded, patting my arm, satisfied with my answer. But I couldn't shake the unease curling tighter and tighter inside me. Later that night, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found Daniel near the front door, laughing with a group of Michael's friends. He looked so normal, so at ease, as though the moment on the porch had never happened. When he caught my eye, he crossed the room to kiss my forehead. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Of course," I replied, though my voice wavered. On the drive home, he filled the silence with chatter about work, about how Michael's friends seemed like good guys, about how our parents had outdone themselves with the party. I nodded at the right times, murmured agreement, but inside my head, the porch scene replayed on a loop. Sophie's flushed cheeks. Daniel's low voice. The way they snapped apart when I appeared. When we finally pulled into our driveway, Daniel turned to me with a smile. "You know, I'm glad Sophie found someone like Michael. He seems solid. Good for her." End quote. His words were casual, but I couldn't stop myself from wondering, was that guilt behind his eyes, or was I imagining it? I wanted to believe him. I wanted to shove my suspicions back into the dark corner of my mind where I kept all the other doubts. But the seed had been planted. And no matter how many times I told myself I was overthinking, the image of Daniel and Sophie standing too close on that porch refused to fade. That night, as Daniel slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the scent of Sophie's perfume still faint in my nose. Something was wrong, I could feel it, deep in my bones. And though I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew the cracks in my perfect life had just widened. It was 3 weeks after Sophie's engagement party when the truth finally began to claw its way into the light. I had gone to my annual physical at the clinic where I worked, just another routine checkup between night shifts and weekend duties. I didn't expect anything unusual. I certainly didn't expect my world to tilt off its axis in the hallway outside my doctor's office. I was walking back from the lab when I heard a familiar voice call my name. "Emily, how are you?" It was Dr. Patricia Miles, one of the OB/GYNs at the hospital and someone I'd known for years. She was Sophie's gynecologist back in college, and though our interactions were usually casual holiday parties, staff meetings, there was always warmth in her eyes. "Patricia, hi," I said, smiling. "Busy as ever, how about you?" "Oh, you know," she said, adjusting the files in her hand. "Babies don't wait." Keeps me on my toes. We laughed, that easy medical staff banter, but then her expression softened. "I ran into Sophie last week. She must be so excited with everything going on. Wedding, baby. It's a lot to juggle." The word hit me like a slap. "Baby?" I repeated, my voice sharper than I intended. Patricia's smile faltered. "Oh, she hasn't told you?" I shook my head, my throat suddenly dry. "Oh God, Emily, I'm so sorry. I assumed the family knew by now. She's in her first trimester. I only meant well. I'll just say I wish her well." Her words stumbled over themselves as she backed away. "Please don't mention I said anything. Doctor-patient boundaries, you know." But I barely heard the rest. My ears roared with the sound of blood rushing, the sterile hallway spinning around me. Sophie was pregnant. And she hadn't told me. I forced a smile, managed a quick goodbye, and staggered into an empty stairwell, gripping the railing like it was the only solid thing in the world. Pregnant. My sister. Weeks before her wedding. And the math. Oh God, the math. First trimester meant? What? 6, 7, maybe 8 weeks along, which landed squarely in the time when Daniel's late nights had become a constant refrain. The timing lined up too neatly, too cruelly. I wanted to deny it, to shove the suspicion back down where it belonged. James, her fiancé, was the father. Of course he was. That was the only explanation that made sense, the only explanation my heart could bear. But the whisper in the back of my mind, the one I'd been silencing for months, rose up, louder now. What if it wasn't James? That night, while Daniel showered, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at his locked office door across the hall. He'd always said it was attorney-client privilege that kept it locked. But I knew better. Years ago, when he'd lost his office keys, I'd quietly had a copy made for emergencies. He didn't know I still had it. I moved like a thief in my own house, the key trembling in my hand as I slid it into the lock. The click was too loud, echoing in the silence of our home. Inside, his office smelled of leather and faint cologne, neat piles of legal briefs stacked on his desk. His laptop glowed faintly in sleep mode. I sat down, my heart hammering. Of course it was password protected. But Daniel, for all his cleverness, had always been sentimental. His password had never changed since the day we got married. Our anniversary date. My fingers typed it in before I could second-guess myself. The screen unlocked with a soft chime. What I found at first was nothing. Clean emails, spotless browsing history. He was careful. Too careful. Panic rose in me. Maybe I was wrong, maybe this was a terrible mistake. But then a memory surfaced from a true crime podcast I'd listened to once. People always forget about the cloud. I clicked into his photo backups. Thousands of images. Work dinners, courtroom snapshots, family holidays. I scrolled quickly, my hands sweating. My breath shallow, and then I saw a folder marked innocuously. Legal research. My stomach flipped. I opened it. The first photo was of Sophie at the beach, her blonde hair whipping in the wind. Too casual, too personal. My hand shook as I clicked the next. A selfie of them in what looked like a hotel bar, her hand resting on his chest, his arm around her waist. My vision blurred. I kept scrolling. Photo after photo. All documenting stolen moments. Sophie in his car, Sophie laughing over a drink, Sophie sitting cross-legged on a bed I didn't recognize. And then the last image stopped me cold. A pregnancy test. Positive. The date in the corner was 2 weeks after Sophie's engagement party. But worse, so much worse, was the background. I knew that background. The pale gray duvet. The lamp on the nightstand. The oak dresser against the wall. It wasn't a hotel. It wasn't Sophie's apartment. It was my bedroom. My bed. Our home. I slapped a hand over my mouth, choking back the scream clawing its way up my throat. The phone slipped in my shaking hand as I stared at the photo, willing it to disappear. But it didn't. It stayed there, undeniable, seared into my brain. They had been in my home. In my bed. They had desecrated the one place I thought was safe. I don't remember closing the folder. I don't remember locking his office door behind me. Somehow, I stumbled into the bathroom and collapsed onto the cold tile floor, vomiting until there was nothing left in me but shaking sobs. When I finally dragged myself back to bed, Daniel was already asleep, his breathing slow and steady. I stared at him in the dim light, at the man I had trusted with my whole life, and felt something inside me die. The next 2 weeks were the hardest performance of my life. Each morning, I smiled over breakfast, kissed him goodbye, asked about his cases like nothing had changed. Each afternoon, I answered Sophie's calls, helped her choose flowers, pretended to gush about dress fittings. Each night, I lay beside Daniel, my body rigid while he reached for me, murmuring words of love I no longer believed. At Sophie's rehearsal dinner, I stood before the crowd and delivered a glowing toast about love and loyalty. My voice was steady, my smile convincing. People clapped, some wiping away tears, and Sophie hugged me tightly afterward. "You're the best sister anyone could ask for," she whispered. I hugged her back, my arms wrapping around the slight swell of her stomach. "I'm so lucky to have you," she added. My throat burned. Lucky. That was the word she chose. I pressed my cheek against hers, my voice low and even. "How are you feeling?" I asked softly. "Any nausea?" Her body stiffened in my arms. She pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, hers wide and startled. "Why would you ask about that?" "Just wondering," I said with a sweet smile. "Lots of brides get nervous stomachs before the wedding." "Oh. Right. No. I'm fine. Perfect." She smiled then, but it didn't reach her eyes. That word again. Perfect. Later, on the hotel balcony, Daniel handed me a glass of wine. "Beautiful speech," he said, kissing my temple. "Made me fall in love with you all over again." The words should have melted me. Once, they would have. Instead, they tasted like ash. "I know things have been distant lately," he continued, his arm around me. "But after the wedding, let's take a vacation. Just the two of us. Start fresh." "Sounds nice," I replied, sipping the wine. My smile stayed in place, but inside, my rage coiled tighter, hotter. He didn't see it. He never did. He saw only the version of me I allowed him to see. The devoted wife, the loyal sister, the woman too blind to notice the storm building right under her nose. But he was wrong. I knew now. And I was planning. For 2 weeks, I became an actress in my own life. Every word, every smile, every gesture was a carefully chosen line in a script I hadn't wanted to write. To everyone else, I was still Emily, the devoted sister, the supportive wife, the maid of honor who poured herself into making Sophie's wedding day perfect. But inside, I was someone else, entirely, someone darker, sharper, a woman who carried a secret so heavy it felt like walking with dynamite strapped to my chest. Every morning I woke up beside Daniel, and every morning I had to remind myself not to let the rage show. He would brush his lips against my forehead and say, "Morning, beautiful," as if he hadn't destroyed everything we had built together. I would smile, murmur a reply, and force myself not to recoil from his touch. When he left for work, I would stand at the window, watching his car disappear, my nails digging crescents into my palms. He thought I didn't know. He thought his lies still held weight. But I knew. God, did I know? With Sophie, it was harder. She had always been my shadow, my confidant, the one person I believed I could trust unconditionally. Pretending with her felt like swallowing glass. We spent afternoons at bridal shops, her face glowing as she tried on gown after gown. "What do you think of this one?" she'd ask, twirling in front of me, the silk whispering around her ankles. I would nod, offer compliments, adjust her veil, and keep my voice steady even as my stomach turned. She thought she was playing me, hiding her little secret behind smiles and perfect hair. But I was the one playing her now. I wrote my maid of honor speech in those 2 weeks. Draft after draft, tearing them up, rewriting them, perfecting the rhythm of my words. I knew this speech would be my weapon, my scalpel, the moment when I carved open their shiny little lie in front of everyone. It had to be flawless, gentle enough to draw them in, sharp enough to cut when the time came. In the evenings, I would sit with Sophie over glasses of wine, listening to her gush about honeymoon plans and baby names she hadn't yet dared to say out loud. I smiled at the right moments, asked the right questions, even teased her about how nervous brides always got before the big day. Inside, though, I was cataloging every lie, every false word, every flash of guilt in her eyes. She thought I was the sister she could lean on. She had no idea I was waiting, biding my time. Daniel, too, played his part to perfection. He was attentive in those weeks, almost suspiciously so, as if he sensed a shift but couldn't name it. He brought me flowers once, lilies from the corner shop, and placed them in my hands with that lawyer's smile that had won me over years ago. "I've been neglecting you," he admitted softly. "After the wedding, let's take that vacation we keep talking about. Paris, maybe?" I had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing. Paris. He wanted to stroll with me under the Eiffel Tower after sneaking into hotel rooms with my sister. I let him kiss me, even let him hold me close at night, all while counting down the days until his mask would shatter. The hardest part was keeping my rage under control in front of our parents. My mother was so caught up in the wedding frenzy, flowers, caterers, seating charts, that she didn't notice the tension simmering beneath my skin. My father, always more reserved, studied me a few times with narrowed eyes, as though he could sense something was off. "You doing okay, kiddo?" he asked one Sunday morning as we set up chairs in the backyard for a pre-wedding brunch. "Of course," I said brightly, even though the lie tasted bitter. "Everything's perfect." That word again. Perfect. It haunted me, taunted me. Their marriage would be perfect. Our family was perfect. My life had been perfect. Perfect was just another word for fragile. At night, when I was alone, I rehearsed. I stood in front of the mirror, delivering my speech in a calm, steady voice. I timed the pauses, the smiles, the moments when I would look directly at Sophie or Daniel. I practiced until I could say every line without my voice shaking. Because that was the key. I couldn't be emotional. If I screamed, if I cried, if I broke down, they could dismiss me as hysterical, bitter, jealous. But if I was calm, if I delivered the truth like a surgeon making an incision, no one could deny me. The days crawled by, every detail of the wedding falling into place. Sophie asked me to help her write her vows. "You're so good with words," she said, handing me her notebook. I wanted to throw it in her face. Instead, I sat beside her, nodding, suggesting phrases about honesty and loyalty, biting my tongue until I tasted blood. She wrote the words down carefully, never realizing the irony. Daniel grew restless as the wedding approached. He hated the fittings, the rehearsals, the endless chatter about flowers and menus. But he endured it, smiling for the cameras, cracking jokes to lighten the mood. He was so good at playing the role of perfect husband, perfect brother-in-law, perfect groomsman. But I knew the truth now, and every smile, every touch, every word was another knife twisting in my gut. 2 nights before the wedding, Sophie called me late. I just want you to know how much I love you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You've always been my rock, Emily. I couldn't do this without you. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. I love you too. I whispered, because despite everything, part of me still meant it. I loved the sister she used to be. The sister who hadn't destroyed my life. When the morning of the wedding finally arrived, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The time for rehearsing was over. The time for pretending was ending. Today, the truth would come out. I helped Sophie into her gown, fastening the tiny buttons down her back, smoothing the veil over her hair. She looked radiant, glowing with that unmistakable light of early pregnancy. Isn't it beautiful? She asked, twirling once in front of the mirror. Yes, I said softly. It's everything you deserve. End quote. Her smile faltered for half a second, like she heard something in my tone she couldn't quite place. Then she brushed it off, hugging me tightly. I love you, she said again. I love you too, I replied. And in that moment, I realized it was true. But love and forgiveness are not the same thing. As the guests began to arrive, I stood back, watching the swirl of dresses and laughter, the clink of champagne glasses, the hum of anticipation. I smiled when people spoke to me, posed for photos with Sophie, kissed Daniel when he put his arm around me. To anyone watching, we were the perfect family. But inside, I was counting down the hours. The ceremony. The vows. The reception. The moment when the band would go quiet, when all eyes would turn to me, when I would lift my glass and deliver the truth like a blade slicing through silk. For 2 weeks, I had carried this secret like a bomb, and now, finally, the pin was about to be pulled. The resort in Dallas was breathtaking, the kind of venue brides dreamed of. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, casting warm golden light over the ballroom. Tables overflowed with roses and peonies, each place setting marked by hand-calligraphed cards. An ice sculpture of intertwined swans sparkled near the buffet, while a 10-piece band tuned their instruments at the far end of the room. From the outside, it was a flawless scene, a celebration of love, family, and beginnings. From the inside, my inside, it was a powder keg waiting for a spark. I stood beside Sophie as she adjusted her veil, her reflection glowing in the mirror. She was radiant, her fitted mermaid gown skimming her figure in a way that disguised her secret for now. It's perfect, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, I said quietly, smoothing the fabric down her back. Perfect, end of tree. The word burned on my tongue. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. I walked down the aisle, bouquet clutched in my hand, smiling for the cameras as though my heart weren't a hollow, aching pit. Daniel looked sharp in his tuxedo, green eyes gleaming, giving me a wink as I took my place. My stomach twisted at the sight. Sophie floated down the aisle to thunderous applause, Michael's eyes wet with tears as he watched his bride approach. I wanted to scream at him then, to tear the veil from her head and shout the truth in his face, but I held my silence. Not yet. The vows were exchanged, the rings slipped onto trembling fingers. You may kiss the bride, the minister announced, and Michael kissed Sophie with all the devotion of a man who believed in forever. The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Guests dabbed their eyes. I clapped too, my smile steady, my performance flawless. Inside, I was counting down. The reception was lavish, every detail curated to perfection. Champagne flowed, waiters carried trays of hors d'oeuvres, and laughter filled the air. Michael's parents looked proud, Sophie glowed, and Daniel played the part of the charming groomsman, his hand occasionally brushing against mine as if nothing had changed. I wanted to slap him, to rip his mask away then and there, but I forced myself to wait. When the band quieted and the best man finished his light-hearted toast, it was my turn. I stood, tapping my champagne flute with the silver spoon I'd hidden in my napkin. The clear chime cut through the chatter, and hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Good evening, I began, smiling warmly. For those who don't know me, I'm Emily, Sophie's older sister and maid of honor. Polite applause rippled through the room. Sophie dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a tissue, already emotional. Michael beamed at me, full of trust. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smiling with pride, utterly unaware. I've had the privilege of watching Sophie grow up, I continued, my voice steady, rehearsed. From a wild little girl stealing my Halloween candy to the beautiful woman standing before us tonight. And I've watched her find love with Michael, a man who truly brings out the best in her. That kind of love is rare, and it deserves to be celebrated. The crowd murmured their agreement, nodding. Sophie's smile widened. Daniel raised his glass. Everything was going exactly as I had planned. But love, I said, pausing just long enough for silence to settle, requires more than celebration. It requires honesty. Complete, unflinching honesty. The room stilled. I could feel the shift in energy, the subtle tightening of shoulders, the expectant looks. Sophie's smile faltered. Daniel's brow furrowed slightly, his smile dimming. My sister has always been good at keeping secrets, I said, turning my eyes to Sophie. Even as a child, she could hold on to them longer than anyone I knew. Some might say, too good. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. Sophie's hands gripped the tablecloth. And while tonight is about beginnings, it's also about truth. Because marriages built on lies don't last. And there are lies here tonight. Big ones. Gasps fluttered around the room. Sophie's lips parted, but no sound came out. Michael turned toward me, confusion etched across his face. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hand curling into a fist on the table. 8 weeks ago, I continued, my voice slicing through the silence, was a busy time for Sophie. Wedding planning, fittings, meetings with vendors. One of those meetings, she told us, was with a florist at the Marriott downtown. Sophie's face drained of color. Funny thing, I said sweetly, because that very night, Daniel told me he was working late at the office. What a coincidence that they both happened to be at the same hotel. The room gasped louder this time. People leaned forward, whispers spreading like wildfire. And now, I said, lifting my glass, Sophie has even more to celebrate. She's expecting a baby. 8 weeks along, if I'm not mistaken. Which means this little miracle was conceived right around that night at the Marriott. Oh die. The ballroom went utterly silent, the kind of silence that vibrates in the bones. Sophie's hands trembled. Michael's face contorted, confusion turning into horror as he looked from me to her, then to Daniel. Tell him, Sophie, I said, my voice calm, steady. Tell your husband why you're not sure who the father of your child is. The sound of glass shattering cracked through the silence. Michael's champagne flute slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor, shards scattering across the polished wood. No, Sophie whispered, her voice breaking. Emily, please. Is it true? Michael demanded, standing so abruptly his chair toppled backward. Is it true? Sophie sobbed, her hands outstretched toward him. I can explain. Explain? His voice cracked, raw with betrayal. Explain what? That you slept with your sister's husband? That the baby you're carrying might not even be mine? He whirled toward Daniel, fury blazing in his eyes. You. Did you sleep with my wife? Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. But silence was louder than any denial. Michael lunged. His fist connected with Daniel's jaw with a sickening crack that echoed across the ballroom. Daniel went down hard, blood streaming from his nose onto the pristine white floor. Gasps turned into screams. Guests scrambled back, chairs screeching, drinks spilling. Michael, stop! Sophie screamed, but Michael was already shoving through the crowd, his face pale with devastation, his hands shaking. He stormed out, leaving Sophie sobbing in her wedding gown, her veil slipping from her hair like a discarded costume. My parents stood frozen. My mother's hand covered her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. My father's face turned purple with rage. His fists clenched at his sides. The band had stopped playing, their instruments hanging uselessly in their hands. The photographer kept snapping pictures, documenting every second of the disaster like a war correspondent. Daniel struggled to his feet, holding a napkin to his bleeding nose, his tuxedo shirt stained. Emily, please, he croaked, reaching toward me. I stepped back, my smile cold. Don't. You destroyed everything. Sophie sobbed, turning on me. How could you do this to me? How could I? The laugh that ripped from my throat was sharp, ugly. How could you? My sister, my baby sister, who I loved more than anyone, you slept with my husband. In my bed. It was a mistake, she cried. We were drunk, It just happened. Twice, I corrected, my voice like ice. At least twice that I know of. How many other times, Sophie? How many other nights did you lie to my face while sneaking into hotels with him? Her silence was answer enough. The guests were fleeing now, gathering purses and jackets, whispering in shocked tones as they hurried out. This would be the talk of the town for years, the wedding that ended in scandal, the night perfection collapsed in front of 300 people. Good, I thought. Let them talk. Let everyone know. My father finally snapped, storming toward Daniel with murder in his eyes. You bastard, he growled. I welcomed you into this family. Trusted you with my daughter. Both my daughters, apparently. His fist swung faster than Michael's had. Daniel hit the ground again, groaning, his face a bloody mess. Daddy, stop! Sophie wailed, grabbing his arm. You betrayed your sister, your husband, this entire family, he roared. I stood tall amid the wreckage, my glass still raised. Here's to the truth, I said quietly, though no one was listening anymore. The perfect wedding had become rubble in minutes. And I was the one who lit the match. The ballroom emptied quickly after Michael's outburst, guests whispering furiously as they shuffled out, clutching their coats like shields. By the time the band packed up their instruments and the waitstaff hovered uncertainly at the edges, only family remained raw, broken, unraveling in the ruins of a night meant to celebrate love. Michael was gone. He had stormed out into the Texas night, his mother chasing after him, his father close behind. I later learned he drove straight to his parents' home and refused to answer Sophie's calls. By midnight, his lawyers had emailed hers, declaring the marriage null before it had even begun. An annulment, swift and brutal. It was over. Just like that. Sophie sat collapsed in a chair. Her white gown crumpled around her like a costume that no longer fit. Mascara streaked her cheeks, her carefully styled hair falling limp as she sobbed into her hands. He won't even talk to me, she cried. He won't give me a chance to explain. Explain what? I asked coldly, standing across the room. That you betrayed him with my husband? That the baby you're carrying might not even be his? There's no explanation for that, Sophie. Only consequences. Daniel staggered toward me, still holding a napkin to his bleeding nose, his tux stained with crimson. Emily, please, he rasped. His green eyes, once the thing I loved most about him, looked desperate, hollow. We need to talk about this. Alone. There's nothing to talk about, I said flatly. I want a divorce. And one. The words cut through the air like a blade. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth again. My father froze mid-stride, staring at me like I'd just declared war. Emily, don't say that, Daniel begged. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. I love you. I never stopped loving you. What happened with Sophie was, don't you dare call it a mistake, I snapped. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is leaving the milk out. What you did, what you both did, was a choice, over and over again. Sophie sobbed louder, rocking in her chair. I loved him first. She blurted suddenly, her voice raw. The room went silent. My parents turned toward her, stunned. What did you just say? I whispered. Sophie lifted her tear-streaked face, her eyes red and swollen. I loved him before you. I saw him first at that bar years ago, before you even knew his name. I was going to talk to him, but you came back from the bathroom, and he noticed you instead. And I let it happen. I stepped aside. My jaw clenched so tightly I thought my teeth would shatter. So what, Sophie? You waited 8 years, lurking in the background, until you finally got your chance to take him from me? That's not love. That's obsession. That's selfishness. I couldn't help it, she sobbed. He looked at me that night at the engagement party, and all those feelings came back. I didn't mean for it to happen, Emily. I didn't want to hurt you, and to first, but you did. I said, my voice sharp as glass. You destroyed everything. My marriage. Your own wedding. Our family. My father's face darkened with rage. You disgust me, he growled at Sophie. Both of you. His fingers stabbed the air toward Daniel. I trusted you. I treated you like a son. And this is how you repay us? Daniel flinched under his glare. Mr. Miller, I swear, I never meant. My father lunged as though ready to hit him again, but my mother grabbed his arm. "Stop it," she cried. "Violence won't fix this." "Nothing can fix this," I said bitterly. My mother turned to me, her face wet with tears. "Emily, please. She's your sister. You can't just cut her out forever. Families survive things like this. We can work through it." I laughed, but the sound was harsh, broken. Work through it? She slept with my husband. In my bed. She's pregnant with a child that might be his. Tell me, Mom, how do we work through that over Sunday brunch? How do we patch that up with hugs and tea? Sophie sobbed harder, curling into herself. "I'm sorry," she repeated over and over, like a mantra. "I'm so sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught?" I demanded. Her silence was answer enough. Daniel tried again, his voice breaking. "Emily, please. Don't throw us away. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I'll end it with her. I'll prove to you that I still love you." Untrily paced. "You ended it the second you touched her," I said coldly. "I will never forgive you. Not for this." He reached for me again, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me." The ballroom was a graveyard of champagne glasses and abandoned flowers. The ruins of a wedding that never was. Chairs stood crooked, petals littered the floor, and in the center of it all, my sister wept in her ruined gown, while my husband begged for forgiveness he would never get. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor. At the door, I turned back once, my eyes sweeping over the wreckage of my family. "Some things," I said softly, "can't be forgiven." And then I left. The days that followed were a blur of fallout. Michael never returned Sophie's calls. He moved his belongings out of her apartment within 48 hours and filed the annulment paperwork by the end of the week. His family issued a polite but firm statement to the guests who had attended, thanking them for their support and asking for privacy. Privately, though, I heard through mutual friends that they were livid. They had invested thousands into the wedding, into Sophie, into a future they thought was secure. Now it was all ashes. Daniel tried to come home that night, pounding on the front door until my knuckles went white on the lock. "Emily, please. Let me in. We can talk about this." I didn't open it. I packed a suitcase the next morning, booked a hotel, and called a divorce lawyer before lunch. The phone calls from my mother started immediately. "Emily, please," she begged, "don't make any rash decisions. Think about what you're doing. You've built a life with Daniel. You can't just throw that away." "I didn't throw it away," I said coldly. "He did. Sophie did." Sophie herself left dozens of voicemails, her voice cracking in every one. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I love you. Please don't hate me, you're my sister." But I couldn't listen. Every word was a knife twisting deeper. Our father barely spoke at all. When he did, it was clipped, furious. "You made your bed, Sophie. Now you can lie in it." By the end of the week, word had spread through town. The perfect Miller sisters were now the scandal of the season. People whispered in grocery store aisles, coworkers exchanged looks in hospital hallways. Sophie's Instagram followers dipped, comments flooded her posts with venom. "Homewrecker," they called her. "Disgrace." She shut down her account within days. For me, there was no shame, only a hollow kind of freedom. My marriage was over, yes. My family was fractured beyond repair. But at least the truth was out. At least I wasn't living in lies anymore. One night, Daniel found me at the hotel. His eyes were red-rimmed, his suit wrinkled, his once polished image crumbling. "Emily," he begged, falling to his knees in the hallway. "Don't do this. Don't leave me. I'll do anything." I looked down at him, this man who had once been my whole world, and felt nothing but exhaustion. "It's already done," I said, and I closed the door in his face. In the weeks that followed, the wreckage of that night spread wider. My parents stopped attending social events, humiliated by the whispers. Sophie moved back into their house, her reputation in shreds, her wedding gown shoved into the back of a closet like a cursed relic. Daniel's firm suspended him after I handed over the credit card statements showing his hotel charges. His career began to crumble as fast as his marriage. But the worst part wasn't their downfall. It was the silence that fell between us all. The gulf that had opened in a family that had once been close. Where there had been laughter, there was only bitterness. Where there had been trust, there was only betrayal. And through it all, one truth echoed in my mind, steady and unrelenting. They thought they could lie to me. They thought I would never discover it. But I did. And I would never, ever forgive them. The divorce was finalized quicker than I expected. My lawyer was sharp, meticulous, and relentless in presenting the evidence I had gathered: the emails, the hotel receipts, the photos, the credit card charges. When the judge reviewed the details, the outcome was almost merciful in its clarity. The house in Austin was awarded to me, along with the majority of our shared assets. Daniel was left scrambling, his once polished reputation shredded not only in court but also at his law firm. After I submitted proof that he had used his company's credit card to pay for hotel rooms with Sophie, the partners had no choice but to let him go. The man who once came home in tailored suits and a briefcase now faced unemployment, scandal, and the wreckage of a life he had built on deceit. As for Sophie, she carried the pregnancy to term. I didn't visit her at the hospital, though I heard through my parents that she gave birth to a baby boy. When the paternity test came back, confirming what I already knew, that Daniel was the father, it was like the last nail sealing a coffin. Whatever flicker of pity I might have felt for her vanished. She had destroyed her own life as surely as she had tried to wreck mine. I cut contact with both of them entirely. There would be no phone calls, no apologies, no second chances. To me, they were strangers. In the quiet that followed, I finally began to heal. At first, it was disorienting, waking up in an empty bed, walking through a house that echoed with silence. But then, slowly, I began to reclaim it. I painted the walls new colors, donated the furniture Daniel had chosen, filled the space with plants, light, and music. For the first time in years, the house felt like mine. Work became a sanctuary. Caring for children in the pediatric ward reminded me daily of resilience, of how even the smallest hearts could endure so much and still fight to live. Their laughter, their bravery, gave me strength. Outside of work, I allowed myself something I had long denied: freedom. I traveled, visiting places I had once only daydreamed about. The beaches of California. The mountains in Colorado. A quiet cabin by a lake where I could sit with a book, a cup of coffee, and the peace of knowing no one could betray me there. In time, I took that healing and turned it outward. I founded a support group for women who had been betrayed, creating a space where stories could be shared without judgment, where strength could be rebuilt from ashes. Sitting in that circle, listening to others, I realized my pain had a purpose. It allowed me to guide others toward their own rebirth. Looking back now, I see that happiness doesn't always come from the picture-perfect family we're taught to strive for. My marriage, my sister, the facade of perfect, nearly broke me. But true happiness came from stripping all that away, from living with honesty, freedom, and the courage to choose myself. And in choosing myself, I finally found peace. Looking back on everything I went through, I've come to realize that betrayal, no matter how devastating, can also be the doorway to rediscovering yourself. For years, I believed my worth came from holding my family together, from maintaining the illusion of perfection at all costs. I silenced my instincts, ignored the warning signs, and convinced myself that doubt made me weak. But the truth is, strength doesn't come from pretending things are fine. It comes from facing reality with open eyes and the courage to walk away from what no longer serves you. Losing my marriage and my sister's trust cut me to the core, but in that loss, I found something far greater. My own voice, my own freedom, and the understanding that love built on lies will always crumble. Today, I know happiness isn't about appearances or living up to anyone else's expectations. It's about choosing honesty, respecting yourself enough to set boundaries, and creating a life that reflects your true values. Pain changes us, but it also teaches us who we are. And sometimes, the most powerful act of love you can give is the one you give to yourself. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.